Hello and welcome back to From the Nosebleeds podcast brought to you by myself, Walter Limbeck, and Jacob Wetzel. Today we're going to get into championship college football weekend. We're also going to talk about college basketball as more games start to get into the thick of the college basketball season, and we're nearing that conference season time. And we'll also get some bets in for you guys. Currently, we're recording this Friday night as a couple games and the championship slate are taking place. USC, Oregon right now. Oregon is currently leading 21-14, but USC just got the ball back with under a minute to go in that one. UAB against Marshall in Conference USA championship game. UAB currently just increased their lead to 12-7 as they're just underway in the fourth. Buffalo and Ball State in the MAC. Ball State's got a 38-21 lead right now. In that one, Buffalo's got the ball, and we're about midway through the third there. You got any takeaways from these games so far, Jacob?
I think the biggest one's probably the Ball State up 17 um, on Buffalo. I know it's a neutral site game, but Ball State has looked dominant in the MAC, and I know they've played, Akron and Bowling Green, two of the lesser opponents in that conference, but you just kind of thought coming into this game that it was Buffalo's game to lose, and Ball State. I haven't watched any of it, but just seeing Ball State put up 31, holding Buffalo to 21 points after it seems like they put up 50 every week. It's impressive. I think it shows how good Ball State actually is. They lost, I think, just the one game early in the year to Miami of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty impressed by that. And the other game that kind of stands out is the UAB Marshall game. Marshall got all the way up to like 16, I think, when they were undefeated, and now they're potentially losing back-to-back games. I believe both of them at Marshall. So just kind of surprising there. I think two games where you kind of thought the favorite was going to roll through and win, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, you talked about both those teams there. Buffalo definitely been impressive, like you mentioned. The one thing about them too is that, like you said, they're not only winning games, they've been dominant and they've covered every game except one. And the one game was against Bowling Green, where they kind of let up and let off the gas a little bit towards the end. And so, they're not only winning games, they're winning them convincingly and in style. So,
Yeah.
whereas Ball State on the opposite side wasn't really winning games convincingly, but they were winning. Last weekend, you had the crazy ending against Western Michigan with all those laterals and forward passes and stuff that ended up not counting. But like you said, they lost that first game against Miami, Ohio, and I think we were both on Ball State in that game, and they were in that all game, and Miami, Ohio ends up scoring late to win that one. So outside of that, they've really been a good team. Just
Mm-hmm.
haven't put up quite the style points. But it just shows how good they actually are, even though they're not putting up all these style points. And with Marshall, I think the quarterback play has been the main storyline for Marshall. The last two games you mentioned it, they lost to Rice last week, and then this week, currently trailing. And you look at the box score right now. Currently, their starting quarterback is 3 of 13 for 45 yards, and that's just not going to win you many football games in this day and age.
Yeah, you go back to Ball State for just real quick. That you look at their schedule, like they played at Miami, Ohio, lost by 7. They play at Toledo, beat Toledo by 3. At Central Michigan, won by 25, and then home against Western Michigan, won by 3. Like they've played some of the cream of the crop in the MAC with Western Michigan and Toledo.
Central
But
Michigan.
Yeah, they've had a pretty daunting schedule in conference. But yeah, Marshall, like it's just they kind of had all these things going for them, and then they I think they had some COVID issues, had some games postponed, kind of had some breaks in there, and then um, it's just, yeah, I mean, they've really fallen down, came back to earth a little bit. So maybe they can pull it out. I mean, they're in, according to ESPN, they're in UAB territory, so maybe they can still win the game for sure. But I think it's just interesting that they're down at home for the second week in a row. But I tell you, I'm really excited for tomorrow. I think there's a lot of good games tomorrow. I think we want to get started looking at the slate tomorrow. I think the most anticipated, probably going to be maybe the best game of the day, Clemson and Notre Dame. Rematch the game from earlier in the year where Notre Dame won. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is playing again in this game, but I think this it's a 10.5-point spread, which I think is pretty high, pretty high even with Lawrence. But I'm really excited for this because I think you have Clemson's offense with Trevor Lawrence back against Notre Dame's defense, which has been pretty good this year. I think that's kind of the thing I'm looking forward to the most for this game. But what about you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence being back, but I'm more interested to see Clemson's defense. They've got most of their starters that they were actually missing for that Notre Dame game back, especially the leader of that defense, Skowski, is back and healthy and playing. So that I think that's a bigger impact on the game than Trevor Lawrence because we mentioned it, but we're recapping that game. You know, DJ played really well in Trevor's place. Sure, there's probably a few more deep ball throws that Trevor can hit than DJ can right now, but there's not too much more that you could have improved from the quarterback position from what happened in that first game. And I think the defense kind of lacked. So I think it'll be interesting to see how these starters go. And I mean, it's really their biggest test as a healthy unit for this Clemson defense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that Clemson's defense, I think, gets overlooked sometimes with just how good their offense is, the attention Trevor Lawrence gets. So that'll be interesting. But I mean, Notre Dame offensively has really been starting to pick it up. I think like when you kind of think about their offense last year, beginning of this year, like they're still a run heavy pro style offense, but they've been letting Ian Book throw it a little bit more. They've been kind of opening up the playbook. I mean, they scored 47 in double overtime against Clemson, but they went 31, 47, 45, 31, 45. Like they're showing that they can throw the ball around, they can score in a different variety of ways. Yeah, Clemson's defense is good. They get a lot of guys back, but I think Notre Dame's offense is kind of being undervalued as this game is getting closer. The other thing I'm excited to watch is last game when these two teams played, Notre Dame controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And you mentioned that Clemson gets some guys back on that defense. Maybe that helps. Notre Dame's always got it seems like 5 NFL players on that offensive line. So maybe there's maybe that evens it out a little bit more now that Clemson's got some guys back. But I think Clemson. I think if Clemson can control that line of scrimmage a little bit better this game, that's really going to play in their favor because that's really what helped Notre Dame win that game last time they played.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they can get a little more equal play on the line of scrimmage, Clemson can. If Clemson can, I think they'll be better suited in this game. I actually still think Notre Dame wins the line of scrimmage because I think they've got better players on the defensive line and offensive line. Clemson gets players back on the defense line, like I mentioned, but 2 of those are linebackers, one's a corner, and then the other is a defensive lineman, but they're still very young on the defensive line position. They've got a lot of freshmen actually playing in their rotating that they're rotating in. So I think just the experience that Notre Dame has on the lines helps them out, and it really makes me question this line that's at 10.5. I think it's going to be another really close game and probably another game that's going to be one of the games of the year. I'm really looking forward to it, like you said. I mean, this one, I think even more so than the first one, will be a toss-up. And, I mean, that's saying something considering the first one went to 3 overtimes, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think the difference in this has to be which quarterback makes the big plays in the big time moments. Your hand tends to lean towards Trevor Lawrence just because of the resume that he's built.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think if Lawrence can make the plays like we anticipate him to, number one overall pick, best quarterback in the country, yada yada yada, he's gonna have to make the play or two down the stretch. Kind of like what he did last year. Like obviously there was that big call against in the Ohio State game, the pass interference or no pass interference, whatever it was. But he made some plays in that game
Mhm.
that really helped them win. That big run he had, couple nice throws. I think we're going to have to see something like that again in this game, especially against a good defense like Notre Dame. But I mean, Ian Book, man, like he's a 3 or 4 year starter at Notre Dame. He's played in some big games. He's like, is the opportunity he has been wanting. That a Notre Dame fan says this is why he's been a starter for multiple years, is because he got us to this game. Now he's got to go out and make those plays to win. So I don't think 10.5 is the correct line. I think it should be smaller. I don't know if Notre Dame wins outright, but I think having a guy like Ian Book going experience as he is going up against Trevor Lawrence definitely will help them down the stretch in a close game. But I agree with you. I think you're going to tend to lean towards Lawrence if you're saying which one of these quarterbacks is going to make the big play. But yeah, it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a lot closer than what we think. And Notre Dame's defensive coordinator is coaching for this game. Obviously, he got hired to become the head coach at Vanderbilt, but he should be coaching for this, so that'll be a big boost for them. Next game on the slate, I want to go to the Big Ten championship, Northwestern Ohio State. I think this game has the potential to be the ugliest game of the day because for two reasons. Number one, if Northwestern does what they want to do in order to keep it close and win, it's going to be low scoring. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be a lot of clock moving. If Ohio State does what people think they're going to do, it's going to be a blowout. You're not going to want to watch after the first half.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's probably going to be an ugly game either way you look at it, whether it's Northwestern keeping things close, potentially winning, or Ohio State winning and trying to make a statement, hey, we belong in this playoff. I think it'll be kind of ugly. I also think there might be a lot of turnovers in this game. Northwestern tends to not take care of the ball too well, but they also force a lot of turnovers. And we saw Ohio State against Indiana. When you get pressure on them and you cause a little havoc in the backfield, they can turn over the ball. So I think in all aspects, you look at this game, it's going to be kind of ugly, which, I think the game being ugly helps Northwestern because they want to play those ugly games. They want to play those slow paced games. They want to grind it out and kind of just be more physical and physically wear you down to where it gets later in the game and they're still in it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when they tend to strike and, take advantage of other teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what Northwestern's going to want to do, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch Northwestern defensively. You mentioned the Ohio State Indiana game. Indiana blitzed them a lot. That's going to be Northwestern's challenge. Do they blitz and do they leave their corners on an island? Because I mean, I don't think Indiana's heads and shoulders better than Northwestern defensively, but like Northwestern's defensive backs cannot be left alone one-on-one against Ohio State's wide receivers 55-60% of the possessions if Northwestern's going to blitz that much. So I think it's just going to be an interesting approach of do you blitz and then go the route getting pressure on Fields is what you have to do, or do you sit back and say let's go everything underneath. If Ohio State does score, it's going to be 6-7 minute long drives where they chew up a lot of clock, and that's going to help Northwestern keep the game low scoring, help Northwestern say you're going to score, but you're only going to score once a quarter,
Mm.
and we're going to limit your possessions, make you earn it, make you have these long drawn out possessions.
Yeah, I think with regards to the blitz, like you mentioned, I think you might see some more exotic blitzes from Northwestern where they try and disguise things and try and get creative.
Hmm.
And also where they show like maybe pressure from the corner position, but then drop back and play a zone, try and confuse them, try and throw some things at the Ohio State offense that gets them a little uneasy off balance. I think that's their best route to go at it. And Pat Fitzgerald's a good enough coach to scheme something up like that. Been doing this long enough to be able to do that. So I have full faith in him to be able to do that. And I think really the tempo of this game that's set within the first two drives that each team has. So the first four drives of the game will probably tell you the outcome of the game. And
Hmm.
based off those first couple drives, you'll be able to get a good glimpse in at to what's actually going to happen throughout the rest of the game. Because if it's kind of gritty, slow, physical, then it's like okay, we might be in for an interesting game. If it's a little more fast paced and chaotic, then you might be like, okay, there's no way that Northwestern will be able to keep up with the athletes that Ohio State has. Because, I mean, Northwestern's got some great football guys, but they're not necessarily the best athletes out there.
Hmm.
Ohio State's athletes are definitely probably better than Northwestern's.
Yeah, I agree. I think if this game is 14-7 at halftime, Northwestern's feeling good. Even if they're down 14-7, you got to think Northwest like that's where Northwestern wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 28-7 or something like that, where Ohio State's has scored a few touchdowns, like Northwestern can't come back. We saw that when they played Michigan State. They fell down early against Michigan State. They don't have the offensive capabilities to score quick, hit the home run play, have a quick comeback. So yeah, I agree there. I think the first few possessions are going to be very telling of how the game is going to go on that one. All right, next two games. One of them's mine. One of them's yours. We'll go to your game first. Your Cincinnati Bearcats taking on Tulsa. This is the third time that they have scheduled this game to be played. Um, Cincinnati's getting 14 points. Uh, is the game at Cincinnati or is it on a neutral field?
It's at Cincinnati. So the AAC does it where whoever is first in the conference overall
It's the
is
host.
the host.
First takeaway for me, it makes a little bit more sense that Cincinnati's that big of a favorite at home, but I think 14 is a little bit too much. I think should be closer to maybe 10, just because Tulsa's hasn't played in the same amount, basically in like the same amount of time Cincinnati has, and Tulsa's shown a lot of good things defensively, and they've kind of shown their games are kind of like Northwestern's. They're kind of ugly. They're kind of low scoring. They're kind of just grind out dogfight games, um, Cincinnati, I think I don't want to say they don't have a shot to play up because I think I mean anything can happen, but like they're going to have to win this game convincingly by 4 touchdowns to give the committee their best late push. But I think this game's going to be interesting because both these teams haven't played in like a month, so I'm kind of interested to see just kind of how it starts. Is it going to be really ugly, or both? Neither one of these teams I think can afford, or at least Cincinnati can't afford an ugly game. Like they have to play almost a perfect game.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And the thing is, too, Luke Fickle's not one shy to go for the style points we saw earlier in the
East
year.
Carolina,
Yeah,
East
against East
Carolina, yeah.
Carolina. I know people went off on him for the UCF game, but if you watch the rest of the game play out, I mean, he was trying to score the football.
Mm-hmm.
It was more the running back's fault than it was on him. So he definitely understands that he needs the style points and stuff like that. He's not afraid to go for it. So if they get a hold of it, I fully expect him to still keep his foot on the gas and go for it. And the thing too is, like you mentioned, Tulsa's more of a Northwestern style team. Uh, it seems like with their games, whenever you think they're dead, they're not actually dead because they're always still in it. And they play this gritty grind grind them out fashion style, but I don't think that actually helps them out. Whereas, like in Northwestern's case, I could see it helping out against Ohio State because Ohio State doesn't look too physical, too tough so far this year from what we've seen. However, Cincinnati is a team that looks physical. They look tough. They look mean. They look like
Mhm.
they want to play in the trenches. They want to win in the trenches. And that's exactly what Tulsa does as well. The difference is, I think Cincinnati's a more physical team. They're a more dominant team. They're a more, you know, every aspect that Tulsa does well, I think Cincinnati does better. So I don't think it necessarily helps them out unless they can force a lot of turnovers. And Cincinnati does a really good job of taking care of the football.
Mhm.
So I think, while the line is a little bit surprising because Tulsa has stuck around in games, they've kept things close and they've always shown that, hey, we're never truly out of things. I think it's actually telling to just how good Vegas thinks Cincinnati is and how good I think Cincinnati is because I think they probably run away with this thing because I do think they're a physical and dominant team. And where, Tulsa can surprise and come come in and beat other teams in the AAC that are a little more fast paced and spread them out and not as physical. Cincinnati's just as physical, but probably more talented athletically as well.
Yeah, you talked about Cincinnati running up the score on teams. Obviously, the East Carolina game where they uh, ran up the score a little bit there, but you look like Cincinnati's averaging 41 points a game, and Tulsa's only giving up 20. So, um, you talked about like don't be afraid to see or don't. Cincinnati can run up the score. They probably will run up the score if they can start finishing drives like late in the fourth quarter. Um, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think when you watch Cincinnati play, like they they remind me of like a blue collar uh hit you in the mouth like almost like the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Like they're not exactly like they're not Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's like that mentality that you have with the Steelers where you think of a blue collar city and a team that represents that. So I'm excited to see this game because I think it's going to be kind of low scoring to start with, and I think Cincinnati probably gets to Tulsa's defense, starts putting on some points, and then like you mentioned, Tulsa has this never say die mentality, and maybe a backdoor cover happens or something like that, um, but I think this is going to be another game, kind of like the Ohio State Northwestern game, where the first few possessions are going to be telling. If it's real defensive, neither team can get an edge. That's obviously going to favor Tulsa. If it gets a little high scoring, if Cincinnati scores 14 quick ones on Tulsa, I think that's favoring Cincinnati, and that's Cincinnati's offense can put up points. I mean, 41 points a game, and then they're just going to keep rolling up that score. So I think I think that's another game where you're going to see how it's going to go in the first few possessions.
Mm. Yeah, and the one thing that's kind of underrated too about Cincinnati, it's not that they just put up 41 points a game, it's how efficient they are with their possessions because they like to chew the clock and eat a lot of time off the clock as well. So it's not like they're running a UCF style offense where they're getting 80 plays a game. They're probably getting somewhere around 60 to 65 plays a game, but they're doing a lot with those plays. So they're a very efficient offense as well. It's not
Yeah.
just they're putting up points just because they're running a lot of plays.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the few times I've watched Cincinnati about, I think 4 or 5 times this year, and every time like Ritter has that. I don't want to say like he's not a game manager and quarterback, but he's very smart with the ball. He's
Mhm.
very protective of it, and yeah, like he's a perfect kind of quarterback. Watching him play for that system of make the right read, know when to give it to your running back, know when to dump it down, know when to take the shot, and like you said, that leads to not turning the ball over, which is every offensive coach's dream is to not turn the ball over.
Right.
Um, all right, so now we'll go to my game, Oklahoma and Iowa State, Big 12 championship in Dallas. I'm I'm excited. I'm nervous. All those emotions. I mean, I think this has a chance to be the second best game of the day outside of Clemson Notre Dame, just because it's only projected. It's less than a touchdown spread. Is a good close game when they played in Ames earlier in the year. Iowa State's got a very, very good defense that's been really playing well the last few games. Oklahoma's offense has started to figure it out the last few games with Rattler. You knew that they would. I think this is a game that has a chance to come down to the last possession or two, and has a chance to really be a close, good, great game to watch.
Yes, I agree with you fully. I think there's a couple things I'm really interested to see in this one, and that's both these things are on Oklahoma's side of the ball. Because if I see it from them early, I think they will win the game. But if I don't, then I think Iowa State has a chance to win this game, just like they did the first time. And those two things is the last couple weeks I've been hearing about Oklahoma's defense being improved, the front seven being improved, and they've got a good run defense and stuff like that. But the thing is, when you look at it, they haven't necessarily played great offenses. They've played Baylor, they've played Oklahoma State, who they've been a good team, but their offense has not really clicked at all this year,
Yeah.
and they haven't been that great offensively.
And that Oklahoma State game, they got 3 turnovers in the first quarter, kind of set the tone
Mhm.
for the game. A little bit of an outlier there, I agree.
Yeah, and then they played Kansas, Texas Tech, TCU. So these aren't really offensive-minded teams or teams that have been really good offensively this year, whereas Iowa State's a better offensive team. So I really am interested to see how that front seven specifically of that defense does, because if you can get Brees Hall, your workhorse running back, going early, I think that really plays into the hand of Iowa State, gets you going, doing more things that you want to do with the play action, feeding him the ball, getting the ball to your tight ends, your wide receivers, your position players, letting them wreak havoc. And then the other thing I really want to see too from Oklahoma, in order for me to be confident they'll win this game, is the running game on offense. They've picked it up a little in recent weeks, but again, lesser competition than what I think Iowa State is. Yes, I understand. I I don't think Iowa State should be ranked as high as they are because of the Louisiana Lafayette loss. But
Which is
at
a
the
which
same
is a
time,
top 25 team, by the way.
yes, but at the same time, when you look at them recently, which is what everybody's saying, they are a very good team. And I think even though they're ranked at number 6, I still think when people look at Iowa State, they underrate them. And I think that kind of plays into their hands. They're kind of eating at that because they know going into this game, hey, everybody's expecting Oklahoma to come in here and trounce us. I don't think that's going to happen. Even if Oklahoma does win, I think it's still going to be a close game. And like you said, I think this is another one that's probably going to be the second best game of the weekend. And a lot of people after tomorrow will be like, wow, Iowa State's actually no joke. But,
Yeah, yeah. First off, I agree. I think Iowa State's ranked a little bit too high, but at the same time, you look at who they're ranked ahead, with maybe the exception of Cincinnati, but I think that's more just recency bias. Cincinnati
mhm,
hasn't played recently. But you look at who they're ahead, like they're ahead of Oklahoma, who they beat, so that makes sense. They're ahead of Georgia, who also has 2 losses, who's not playing in their conference championship. Um, like they're ahead of these
mhm,
teams who they should be ahead of. It's just they're ranked 6th. And like the Bear was talking about the other day, he said everyone is surprised because a traditionally bad team is ranked 6th. But like Iowa State is good this year. Like you look
mhm.
at who they beat. They beat Oklahoma. They went on the road and beat Texas. They who are both ranked in the top 25. They went on the road. They lost to Louisiana, which by 17 at home, not a good loss. But Louisiana is ranked in the top 25. They lost to Oklahoma State, who's been by 3 on the road, who's been ranked in the top 25 all year. And like they're ranked sixth, but that's because they're sitting at sitting at 8-2 and have beaten everyone that they're supposed to play outside of 2 losses. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like it's interesting because like people want to dog them, but when you really look at the numbers, like they've been, I think Bear threw out a stat of like since Halloween they've been the like basically the second best team statistically in the country. Oh, they're ahead of Notre Dame and just behind Clemson. Um, and then the other stat he threw out was they have the set, like they're like top 10 and top 40 wins according to ESPN. And so I mean, I don't know. Like there's just, this is, you start getting into it, but I'll go back to what you said. Oklahoma's defense has improved. They got some guys back who were suspended or injured, and their defense that front seven starting to put it together. But I think an underrated aspect of Iowa State is their offensive line. Their Iowa State's offensive line has really played well this year. They are, I think they're averaging, giving up about one and a half sacks a game. So they don't like, they do a great job of protecting Brock Purdy, and they do a good job opening holes up for Breece Hall. And Breece Hall's averaging almost 100 yards a game. He's not hit the 100-yard mark one time. That was at Texas. He had like 95 yards. So like they're doing a good job of controlling that line of scrimmage, and that's going to be, I think that is the biggest key for this game, because like Iowa State has the athletes to match Oklahoma. Iowa State has the scheme and the coaching to match Oklahoma. It's just going to be that offensive line of Iowa State against the defensive line of Oklahoma, because Oklahoma's front seven has played, I know, like you said, has not been against great competition, but it's a scary front seven. And Iowa State kind of wants to play like Cincinnati, where they don't score quick, but they're efficient. They like to run the ball. They like to use those tight ends. They like to get the ball out, and they got some guys on the outside to make some plays. So I think it's going to be, if they can keep winning that line of scrimmage, keep controlling that line of scrimmage, let Brock Purdy make his decisions, let Breece Hall get some running lanes, like that is really going to help them, because that is when Iowa State can control the line of scrimmage, what they've done most of the year. That's when they play their best.
Yeah, and I think that's why, I mean, everything you said there and going back to their rankings and everything, I think they're, a little undervalued here. I think 6 points is too much, and I think if anything, it should be closer to 3. It should be really more of a pick 'em kind of game, because it is that type of game. And I think the underrated part too is you've still got a freshman quarterback in Spencer Rattler, and he hasn't been in this big situation in a while. So he hasn't really had that kind of pressure on him. I think Iowa State can create pressure and get to him and cause him to create decisions he might necessarily be ready to make. So I think there's a lot of aspects to this game, and I think it's one of the more interesting games that people are kind of overlooking because of the other games on the slate. But I think, like you mentioned, it's probably going to be one of the better games. And honestly, I tend to want to believe in Iowa State because they've got all the experience, where Oklahoma is a younger team. They're still trying to find their playmakers, not only at the quarterback position, but also at the running back position, the wide receiver position, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's getting a little undervalued because it is Iowa State. Obviously, if it was, I'm not saying Oklahoma versus like Texas would necessarily be a better game. I think the line would be bigger in that case, favoring Oklahoma. But you have 2 marquee names, right? Like Oklahoma playing Iowa State is not a marquee matchup, even though it's 6 versus 10. But yeah, like you think about experience versus non-experience. Like I obviously the Big 12 championship game is the biggest game that this roster, these juniors and seniors for Iowa State have played in. but they've played in big, somewhat big bowl games the last few years. They have gone on the road and played in tough Big 12 environments. Like they're not, like Brock Purdy's not scared or inexperienced in these big moments. And I think that's gonna, like you said, I think that's gonna favor Iowa State because they've played Notre Dame in a bowl game. They've played Washington State in a big crowd and environment. They went to Oklahoma last year and almost won. They've played in these big environments.
Mhm.
So I think it'll be a really really good game. I think it's going to be a close game that's going to come down to the last possession, and I'm excited for it. I'm glad it's at 11, so I don't have to wait too long to watch it. Um, we'll move on to the
Go to
SEC championship game. Oh, you got something?
Yeah, go to the Mountain West before the SEC.
Okay. Mountain West game, Boise State at San Jose State. It's interesting. It's uh it's not like it's on a neutral field, but it's in Vegas. Like it's not where it usually I don't think they usually play there, right?
I think actually the Pac-12 actually usually plays in Vegas, so I
Well, the
don't
Pac-12 usually plays in Levi Stadium.
okay, that's where it is, but I don't think the Mountain West usually plays.
And I think they're playing at UNLV's stadium,
Yeah,
not at the Raiders stadium. So
right.
I don't know, interesting there. But Boise State and San Jose State. This was a game that was scheduled to be played earlier in the year at Boise State. Got postponed. San Diego State, man, like you got to give them a lot of credit. They have been one of like traditionally the worst Division One programs in the country. This year they're 6-0. They're ranked. They're ranked. They've got some impressive road wins for in that conference. Not and then on top of all of that, they like can't even practice at their home facility. They can't even play home games. Like it's incredible the season they've had, and to be here and a chance to win this conference is incredible.
Yeah, I was actually doing research on the Mountain West when it was coming back, and just looking into the different teams to see not only from like a gambling perspective, just from a college football perspective to see who is going to be good. Obviously, most years Boise State's going to be the top of that conference, but I read into San Jose State and what was going on there with the COVID and how they weren't even practicing. They had to travel like an hour or two out just to get to
Hmm.
just be able to practice and do all this. And it's really one of the more remarkable stories of this football season, what's going on there with that program and what they're having to do. And not only that, now they're playing good football. This, like you said, a traditionally very bad program who's playing really good football.
I
They're
mean,
in
they're
balance.
they're they're averaging 17. Averaging giving up 17 and a half points a game. I know there's some bad teams in the Mountain West, but like it doesn't matter who you play in college football in 2020. Only giving up less than 18 points a game is incredible. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this has an opportunity to be a sneaky good game. It's going to be right after the Big 12 and Big 10 championships. It's going to be during the ACC championship, so maybe you throw this game on your side TV and watch it because Boise State has been their one loss came at home to BYU after their backup quarterback went down with an injury. They had played their third string for most of the game. And they're still favored by 6.5 over San Jose State. I mean, I think this has a chance to be a really, really good game, especially if you want to cheer for a team like San Jose State, who you just want to see do well and have a good season.
Mm.
Um, I'll be cheering for them. I think it'll be fun to see them win and go 7-0 and get a chance to play in a decent sized bowl game and a chance to represent a lot of those guys on that team that I'm sure have been around for 4 or 5 years and seen a lot of losses.
Mm. Yeah, I mean they're a pretty balanced team when you look at it, not only offensively but defensively. They play well on every side of the ball, every aspect of football. They do a lot of things well. They don't really beat themselves. They've got a senior quarterback, so he's probably seen a lot, like you mentioned. Definitely an interesting team and definitely somebody to root for, especially if you're looking for an underdog story like they've built. And
Mm-hmm.
hats off to the program for what they've been able to do. can't say enough about it because, I mean, that's truly one of the more remarkable things. You got classes during the day, and then you have to go 2 hours just to get practice in.
Hmm. Yeah, it's incredible. I don't really have anything else on this game. I don't know if you have anything. Yeah, I don't have too much else on it other than just I'm gonna be cheering for San Jose State.
Yeah, that's all I've really got. We can switch now to the last of the title games. And with the last title game, we've got the SEC championship game. We've got Florida and Alabama. A lot of the big storylines so far this week have been about how Florida's only dropped one spot. Excuse me, after falling to LSU, and what was a big surprise to many. And you know, a lot of that's been the storyline. But I want to focus more on this game and Florida against Bama. Traditionally, when you think about this matchup, you think Florida is usually, generally in the recent history at least, uh, had the lesser team, but they've also generally had better offenses than Bama, but Bama's had better defenses. And this year, it doesn't seem like either team has defense.
No, I mean Alabama's definitely had their defensive struggles, but they've also looked really good defensively at times. And obviously LSU, Auburn, some of the teams they've played recently don't have great offenses, but but it's hard to have a bad defense when you have 9 out of 11 starters or 5-star recruits.
Mhm.
Um, I think I think Alabama's got a bad enough defense where Florida's going to be able to put up some points on them, probably 4 to 5 touchdowns. I think Florida's offense with Pitts out there is going to put up points because I think Alabama's defense is just like they're good, but I think they have enough weaknesses, enough problems that Florida can exploit them with how explosive their offense has been at times this year. But I mean, I think like Alabama in this at this point in the year kind of is just an outscore you mode. Like they know they can score on anyone. They know they can score at any time. They know they can all they have to do. Like they have a pro offensive or an NFL caliber offensive line. They know they can give Mac Jones time. They know they have wide receivers who can run by anyone. And it's just, hey, we want to score here. Great, let's air it out 60 yards to one of our 4 NFL future wide receivers. Like it's just they're just going to simply outscore Florida, and we've seen Florida struggle defensively this year too. Like they're not a Alabama's defense is better than Florida's defense.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be. I don't want to I don't want to say again. This is a game where we'll tell in the first few possessions, but like if Alabama jumps out to a quick lead, like the game is over.
Mhm.
They're not. Florida's not going to be able to catch up. Alabama's going to keep putting it on them. Even if they can, Florida tries to match Alabama score for score. Alabama's offense can outlast Florida's offense, and like I said, score on pretty much everyone.
Yeah, I probably misspoke when I said both defenses are bad. Um, Probably have some people attack me for that, but besides the point, I think it speaks. What I meant is Florida's offense this year has proven that they're good enough to really score on anybody, and I think that just speaks to the talent on that offense. And then when you add a guy like Kyle Pitts in, who sat out last week for unknown reasons, but you add him back into the mix, and it causes more problems for that Alabama defense to deal with. I definitely think they can score, and I think last week wasn't really a fluke. A lot of people probably think it was for Florida, but I think
Mhm.
when you look to their last couple games past or since the Arkansas game where they really put it on Arkansas, their last 4 games have been, not too impressive. You go back to the Vandy game, only won by 21. Didn't really look too, thrilled to be playing against Vandy like they wanted to be there. They were kind of on cruise control. You go to that Kentucky game, Kentucky held them pretty close in that first half, really caused them problems, made them feel uncomfortable, and then they kind of pulled away there at the end. Tennessee made them uncomfortable. as well. Yeah, I know they scored a couple times late, but still at the same time, Florida wasn't really clicking on all cylinders. So I don't think that LSU game was as fluky as some people might think it is because they haven't necessarily been playing great football down the stretch. And I think they were kind of on cruise control
Yeah.
after that,
Hmm.
you know, just, hey, let's get to the SEC championship game. And LSU finally woke up and said, hey, we've got a bunch of talent. We've got a bunch of young guys. Yeah, they don't have much experience, but they're still talented guys. And they kind of exposed Florida for trying to sleepwalk through to the SEC championship game. And now here they are. So I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of Florida team do we see.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they try to sleepwalk through the game, didn't take them serious, and you let a bad team hang around, and LSU had gained confidence, gained more and more confidence every minute, and it goes like the Florida player doesn't throw the shoe, they get the ball back, they go down, kick a field goal, win the game. We're not, it's a different story, but yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think Florida's going to come out with a lot of fight, with a lot, because they still have a chance to save the season and say, hey, at the end of the day, you can still finish 9-2, win the SEC championship, and save your season. But yeah, I think it's gonna. I think Florida's gonna come out with a lot of fight, but I like Alabama's just gonna roll. I mean, they're not gonna stop them. But I think there's gonna be a lot of points scored in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like I said, I think Florida's got a talented enough offense to really score on anybody. And then Bama, you've seen what they've been able to do. I think one of the things that's not really talked about enough is the fact that everybody thought Jalen Waddle was the best receiver on the team going into this year, even though Devontae Smith had a better year last year. And not only that, Jalen Waddle's more of a one-trick pony. He's really fast. He can blow by some
Mhm.
guys, really athletic. But Devontae Smith, when you watch the guy run his routes, they're nice, they're crisp, they're clean. He breaks really nicely. He does a lot of things that, don't necessarily see. But when you go back and watch the tape, you're like, wow, that guy's a really solid route runner. And I think that's why he's such a great receiver, is because he's able to run those routes. And then when the play gets broken, he's able to come out of that route and help his quarterback out by getting open. So I think he's definitely probably the best player on the field, in my opinion, in this game. And then Kyle Pitts, what he does for Florida when he's playing is also something we haven't really seen from a tight end at the college level necessarily, because in college they don't really use the tight ends as much as they do in the NFL, I would say.
Mhm.
But what Florida's been doing with Pitts this year is unreal. And I haven't really seen a tight end perform this highly in a while in college football. So I think it's really impressive what he's doing. You're going to see a lot of really skilled players out there at the skill positions.
Yeah, I love watching Devonta Smith, like you said, run routes. It's great. Can't wait to watch him run routes in a Vikings uniform next year. It'll be great. Yeah, there's a lot of good games tomorrow. I'm looking forward to a lot of these games.
Yeah, with that being said, we'll wrap up here and we'll get back to you with our bets for the weekend.